Hello and welcome to this talk about where is the logic of my application. And perhaps the title sounds funny for you, but the problem behind the scenes, it's not funny. I suppose at least one time this problem happened to you. But first, let me introduce me. My name is Andrés Sacco. I work as developer since 2007 using different languages. Most of them are connected with the JVM like Kotlin, Scala, Java, and many others, Groovy, for example. I participate as technical reviewer on some of the biggest publishers. They send me a manuscript about a chapter or the entire book. I read it and send my suggestion to improve the quality. I wrote some books and I recorded some courses. Some of them appear on the presentation, and I participate as a speaker on different conferences. One important thing, you have my contact information, my LinkedIn, my email. So if you have any doubts, any question after this talk, just contact me. Send me a message and I will try to help you as soon as possible. Okay, let me start with the context of our problem. Imagine that you work in a company and this company have tons of different microservices. And a subset of these microservices is responsible, or one team is responsible for a subset of these microservices, and another have the responsibility to keep updated and maintain another set. So there are different teams with different responsibilities. Each team could define their own standard about what is the best idea to name a package or a project or a variable. There is not like a set of rules about all the definitions. Perhaps not all the teams, all the microservices use the same package. Imagine, for example, that you create a microservices, I don't know, 6 months ago, and for some reason you decide, or your team decide, to change the package name. Okay, you have two different strategies of package name, and someone start on your team. Which of them needs to follow this microservices or the another one? It's difficult to find a component, not just for your team, the members of your team. Imagine that someone outside of your team try to help you with, I don't know, fixing a bug or something like that. Okay, where is the repository or the access to the database? Where is the connectors? Where is the configuration of these kind of things? So you spend a lot of time trying to find different things. Each layer could communicate with others without restriction. You can connect, or you can use from the controller access directly to the database, skipping the service or the business logic. It's possible, there is not restriction. Okay, let's see this kind of problem in a graphical way. So you have two different microservices, and for the microservices A, you call repository, and for microservices B, you call persistence. It's the same layer, the layer responsible to access into the database, but for one is repository and for another one is persistence. So if you download one of these microservices and work in the other team, you need to figure out like, okay, repository means persistence, and you spend time to do this. Loggers, for example, some teams or some microservices could decide static final logger, and the other one just logger. The naming about, for example, the controllers or the access to the microservices. One could decide to say, okay, catalog controller, and the other one could say reservation handle HTTP. I know that perhaps it's simple, but imagine that you work with many of these microservices, and not all the teams have the same rules. The DTO, some microservices without any kind of logic, and the other one have a lot of business logic. So, which is the correct one? Okay, we have a problem. So, which alternative exists to fix this kind of problem? Well, first one, informal. There is no definition, there is a definition about the things, but it's more or less like, okay, you are a new member of my team, I will explain more or less the rules, but there is not document. I need to explain everything. And of course, if there is not document, there is a big chance that some of this information is missing or misunderstood. The second one is, okay, we have a document. We have a big document about the rules that you need to follow. The layers that is responsible to access into the database need to follow this pattern. The layers that access to the services must follow this convention. And controller couldn't access directly to the database. You have a restriction. It's a document. So when someone needs some information, it's like, okay, I send the document or the link and you read it. And the last one is automatically a tool or a library that contains all the rules, the same rules that you have in a document. And this tool or library is responsible to check if everything works or not, is follow these rules or not. Okay, so why the informal approaches fail? Why I need a tool perhaps to solve this problem? Well, not all the developers have the same level of experience. Imagine that someone that is a junior developer and perhaps don't understand the risk of changing the package name or include business logic inside a DTO. Not all of them have the same level to understand the risk, this kind of risk. Someone, imagine that you create a lot of features and create a merge request. Someone in the team need to validate that if everything follow this rule or not. So this implies that perhaps if I don't have time to check, 10 files, perhaps I say, okay, the tests are okay, the feature works, deploy on production. I don't pay attention to the naming conventions or the location of the package. Imply too much time in some cases. Imagine if you create a new microservices and you have a lot of endpoints or controllers and tons of different business logic. It's impossible for you pay attention on each variable, on each layer and everything. It's complex. And what happened with the rules? That the rules could change. So I read it, the first version of the rules. Okay, but 6 months in the future, someone will create a new version, and I don't read it. So I will continue using my definition, my version in my mind of the rules that the application must follow. Okay. So, which alternative exists? Well, the first one is PMD. The second one is checkstyle. Perhaps this sounds familiar for you. ArchUnit and findbugs. Okay, we have 4 different alternatives. So, let me show you a brief comparative to understand which is the best alternative with this consideration. With you want to create something like a test unit or a unit test to validate if everything it's okay or not with your code. The only possibility is use ArchUnit, because the other alternative are static analyzers. All of them detect possible problems on the code. I don't know. Then the convention name about capital and letters on the method and the variables. It's possible to create custom rules with all of them. There is not a restriction. But here is another difference. If you want to create a rule that check the package name or the interaction with, between the different package, it's not possible with PMD, checkstyle, or findbox. ArchUnit is the unique alternative to this. The same happens when you use or you do a bad use of the architecture, not follow the rules about which layer access to another one. And it's possible to define rules about the field's name or the method name or something like that, ArchUnit. So you, if you see this, you more or less understand there is a pattern. It's possible to analyze the code, but in the case that you want to create custom rules or validate some kind of things related with the standard definition about Java best practices, ArchUnit is the winner. And of course, all of them have a big community of users and documentation. Okay, which libraries solve all this problem? Well, the library, as I mentioned, is ArchUnit. You can define rules to validate the name and the hierarchy. So this name or this rule is more important than this one. Provide you the possibility to write as unit test. You run these rules or these tests that check the entire logic of your application and show you which of them are okay and which of them are not okay. So you need to fix the code to pass this test. It's the same approach like when you create a unit test to validate something in your application. You can run in a separate step using profiles. The same happens when you have, I don't know, integration test and unit test and many of these things. So you can create different profiles and separate as different steps on CI/CD, I don't know, Jenkins or GitHub Actions. You can create your custom rules outside of the default. And in the case that, for example, the entire company decide to define a set of rules and you say, okay, I don't want to write the rules on each application, on each microservices, it's possible to create a library with all these rules and distribute this library across many microservices. So the different teams import the rules and run in the same way that if you create it inside your application. And it's possible to use on different languages, not just with Java. It's possible to run with Kotlin or Scala. In the case of Kotlin, there is some restriction about the syntaxes because there is some big difference on the languages. Okay, so how is the syntax of ArchUnit? Okay, this is a definition of a layer. So I create a rule and at the first part of this rule I define all the layers. I define like there is a controller, services and repository layer. I define on which package receive all the logic of this layer. And after that, in the second part of the rule, there is a where, and I introduce the restriction. So the services only may be accessible from the controllers or from another services. The repository only need to be accessible from the services. Of course, you can create many layers and many restrictions. This is just a simple example. And for example, in the case of the loggers that you want to be private, static, and final, you say, okay, fields, on the rules, fields that row type, so is a logger, should be private and should be static and should be final and should have this name. As you see, there is like a builder, like be private and should be, and I could append many conditions, not just one. And one little thing, if you see at the top of the definition of the rule, there is an annotation, arch test. This annotation indicates to ArchUnit that this is an active rule that need to be validated in our project. Okay, there is another common problem, the cyclic dependencies. So you have the possibility to say, okay, I want to check if my application has cyclic dependencies, just saying, okay, slice all my application and check if be free cycles. I don't write nothing. I delegate all the responsibility to ArchUnit. And why? Well, it's possible because ArchUnit by default have some validation. You only need to define which things you want to validate. Like this attribute must be private or final or public or accessible for, or need to contain these kind of things. Okay, so what implies the use of ArchUnit? The first one, someone need to define the rules in a document in some place, but someone need to write all the rules. After that, create a library and externalize all the rules, because it's important that you distribute across many microservices. Explain the use of the benefits to all the company. It's not like my team or just my one microservices on the company use ArchUnit. The idea of this is like, okay, is the set of rules of all the microservices on my company or on my team. And someone need to be responsible to maintain and update the rules and see if there is new definitions or new version of ArchUnit. Okay, here is the repository which contains the example. Let me show you. On the repository, I have 3 different microservices. No, 2 microservices and 1 library. One of them is API catalog. Yep. And to add support about ArchUnit, I need to add this dependency, ArchUnit and ArchUnit API. And I created some tests, as I mentioned, or as I show you. Okay, for example, this one. Let me show you a simple example. I created a controller rule test, and this controller rule test need to analyze, and I put the default package to analyze my entire application. This one, you have the possibility to write the package. I define as a constant to reuse across many of my tests. And I say, okay, not include, when you analyze of my code, not include my test, because I don't want to pay attention about the convention or something like that on the test. Just analyze the source code, my application. The rest for me, it's not nothing important or nothing relevant. Okay, so I define our arch test in the same way that I show you, and public method on the controllers should avoid use request mapping. So there is a restriction about not use some specific annotation. To do this, I say methods that are declared in some package, in particular in the controller package, and are public should not be annotated with response body, because, and I put in the case that some of these rules fail, which is the reason about this kind of problem. And the execution of this is just a simple ambient test. Okay, some of my tests fail, which is okay, and here you have the detail about why this test failed, why this ArchUnit fail. This is great because in my case, API catalog contains many tests using ArchUnit. But what happens, as I mentioned, if I need to reuse on many other microservices? Well, the possibility it's simple. It's just create a library like here, and on the POM file, you need to include this dependency. Of course, ArchUnit, but this one related with a plugin from Society General to reuse this test across many other applications. And inside of this, it's more or less the thing that I show you. But you need to define, sorry, not here. You need to define the rules, all the rules here. But instead to have one class with a tons of different rules, you need to create one class per each rule. So the class implement this particular interface, and you need to override the execute. And here inside of the method, it's the same logic that you see on the different slide that I show you. Okay, so in the case of API reservation, which I will use this library, I need to include, of course, ArchUnit, and I create a new profile with which rules of this library I will enable, because you have the possibility to enable one rule or not, but you need to indicate. I suggest try to do this approach. Enable the rules that you want to use it. Okay, you have all this solution on the repository, so if you have any doubts, any question, download the repository or contact me, and I will try to help you with this ArchUnit of this library. Some best practices: define, create a document with all these rules. It's so important that you create a document and specify the different things that you want to validate. Define a prefix about each layer, the controller, the repository, the connectors, and many other things. Define the interaction between the different layers, because it's important for you. Say, okay, the services are accessible only for other services or the controller. Create custom rule. You have the possibility to create some specific rules. For example, I want to validate that my DTOs only have set and get and to a string, for example, and nothing more. It's possible to use it, and in the official documentation of ArchUnit, there is an explanation about how you can create this custom rule. Externalize, create a custom library with all the definition and distribute across many microservices. And this is so important. Be incremental, because if you have a legacy code, it's impossible that at the first attempt everything works. In most of the cases, some of the rules will fail, so enable one by one the rules. Some additional resources in the case that you want to learn more about testing different kind of architecture, different best practices, and some blogs, and the repository, of course. So thank you to assist to this talk.